I dropped the ceramic bowl before I even realized it slipped from my hands. It hits the kitchen floor in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with a crack so sharp it echoes through the narrow room. Pieces scatter under the cabinets, and I feel the vibration shoot up my legs as I lean hard against the counter, grasping the edge with trembling fingers. The pain in my ribs tightens, like a rope being pulled from both ends, forcing my breath out in shallow bursts. My knees buckle. I try to catch myself, but the weakness wins, and I end up sliding to the floor beside the broken pieces. My palms sting where they land on tiny fragments, but I don't move. I can't. The room spins in slow, dizzy circles, and the edge of the fridge blurs like it's underwater. A low, worried sound breaks through the fog, paws tapping lightly across the tile. A warm weight presses against my shoulder. I feel his breath before I see him. Milo nudges his head beneath my arm, pushing insistently, grounding me in a way nothing else can. His fur brushes my cheek, steady and warm. I try to lift my hand, but my muscles shake too hard. So he rests his paw on my thigh, slow and deliberate, like he's reminding me I'm still here. I squeeze my eyes shut, waiting for the worst of the flare to pass. The clock on the stove ticks louder than usual. My chest rises and falls with uneven rhythm, and every inhale feels like it has to fight its way in. Milo stays glued to me, breathing with me, steadying me, not moving, not looking away, not leaving. He never leaves. And as the pain crests, sharp, burning, overwhelming, something inside me cracks, just like the bowl on the floor. But Milo's presence keeps the pieces from scattering too far. And that's when I realized, he'd been holding me together all along. Before I continue, if stories like this resonate with you, I'd love for you to subscribe to Paws That Healed. And tell me in the comments if you've ever lived something similar. Your story matters here. My name is Emily Race. I'm 42 years old, and I live in a small apartment in Albuquerque, New Mexico. 3 years ago, my body began betraying me in ways I couldn't predict or control. It started with exhaustion that felt different from being tired. I'd wake up after 9 hours of sleep feeling like I'd run a marathon in my dreams. My muscles ached in places I didn't know could ache. Then came the fog, this thick, disorienting haze that settled over my thoughts and made simple tasks feel impossible. I'd stand in the grocery store all forgetting why I came. I'd lose words mid-sentence at work, my colleagues staring at me while I fumbled for language that used to come so easily. The doctors called it fibromyalgia combined with chronic fatigue syndrome, two diagnoses that sound benign until you're living inside them, until pain becomes a rotating guest in your body, moving from your shoulders to your hips to your hands without warning, until fatigue isn't something you push through, it's something that pins you down and won't let go. I worked at a small architectural firm downtown. I loved that job. I loved the precision of blueprints, the satisfaction of watching buildings rise from paper into reality. But my body stopped cooperating. I'd miss deadlines because brain fog made me read the same email 5 times without comprehending it. I'd call him sick so often that my boss stopped asking what was wrong and started asking when I'd be reliable again. The answer was never. They let me go quietly, professionally, no drama. Just a severance check and a hollow assurance that they understood. But understanding doesn't pay rent. Understanding doesn't fill the silence that swallowed my apartment after that. My friends tried at first. They'd invite me to dinner, to concerts, to weekend trips. But I'd cancel last minute when a flare hit, when my body refused to cooperate, when even getting dressed felt like climbing a mountain. Eventually, the invitations stopped coming. I watched their lives continue on social media, smiling photos at restaurants I used to go to. Inside joke as I was no longer part of. My family lives in Texas. My mom calls every Sunday, but the conversations feel strained. She doesn't understand why I can't just push through it, why I can't be the daughter she raised. My sister stopped asking how I'm doing after I gave the same tired answer too many times. The apartment became a place where time moved differently. Unopened mail stacked up on the kitchen table. The chair at my breakfast counter stained empty, except for the jacket I tossed there weeks ago. The refrigerator hummed its lonely song, and I'd sit on the couch for hours watching the light change across the walls. Too exhausted to move, too awake to sleep. Albuquerque felt hostile on my worst days, the sunlight too bright against my eyes, the high desert air too thin when my lungs already struggled, the sidewalks stretching endlessly when my legs felt like they'd give out after 3 steps. Living inside my body became an unpredictable war. I'd wake up not knowing if today would be manageable or unbearable. The guilt was worse than the pain sometimes. Guilt for canceled plans, for lost jobs, for becoming someone people had to accommodate instead of enjoy. I started believing I was a burden. So I withdrew further, pulling myself into smaller and smaller spaces until I almost disappeared from my own life. But through all of this, Milo never changed. And the day everything truly broke, he was the one who held me together. Milo came into my life 6 years before my diagnosis, back when I was still running 5 miles every morning and working 50-hour weeks without thinking twice about it. He was a golden retriever mix I adopted from a rescue shelter on a Saturday afternoon, all floppy ears and gentle eyes that looked at me like he'd been waiting for me specifically. He had the calmest energy I'd ever felt in a dog. No frantic jumping, no desperate need for constant attention. Just this steady, intuitive presence. He'd lean his blocky head against my knee when I came home from stressful days at work. I could sense the tension coiled in my shoulders. We'd run together through the foothills, his tail wagging in pure joy, both of us breathing hard and happy under the wide New Mexico sky. I had no idea then how much I'd need him later. When the illness crept in and stole my energy, Milo adjusted without me asking. Our morning runs became slow walks around the block, then around the building, then just to the mailbox and back. He never pulled on the leash, never rushed me. He'd pause when I needed to catch my breath, waiting patiently while I leaned against a fence post, his amber eyes watching me with something that looked like understanding. On my worst days when I couldn't get out of bed, he'd lie on the floor beside me, not demanding anything, just there. He'd wait by the bathroom door during long flare-ups when I'd be stuck on the cold tile, too dizzy to stand. When I finally emerged, weak and embarrassed, he'd press his warm side against my leg and walk me back to bed like a living crutch. He started noticing my symptoms before I did. He'd sniff at my hands and whine softly when pain was about to spike. He'd pace near me, restless and alert, minutes before a bad spell hit. He'd rest his head on my hip when the fatigue crashed over me like a wave, his weight somehow making it easier to breathe through. I remember one night about a year into my diagnosis when everything fell apart at once. The pain hit so hard I couldn't make it to the bedroom. I collapsed on the living room carpet, curling into myself, teeth clenched against the burning that radiated from my spine to every nerve ending. I couldn't call anyone, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Milo appeared beside me in seconds. He didn't bark or panic. He just lowered himself to the floor and pressed the full length of his body against my spine. Warm, solid, real. His chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths, and somehow my own breathing started matching his rhythm. The trembling in my limbs eased slightly. The pain didn't disappear, but his presence made it bearable. He stayed like that for 2 hours, never shifting away, never leaving me alone with it. The guilt crept in during my clearer moments. I'd watch Milo lying on his bed staring at the door like he remembered the days when we'd adventured together. I felt like I was failing him, trapping him in this small, quiet life when he deserves so much more. Deserves someone who could throw balls in the park and take him hiking and give him the active, joyful life he'd had before. But Milo never acted deprived. He never looked at me with resentment or disappointment. When I'd sit on the couch, he'd place his favorite toy at my feet, not demanding play, just offering it. When I could only manage sitting on the porch steps for fresh air, he'd settle beside me, his head resting on my lap, perfectly content. His eyes followed me to every room. The kitchen, where I'd lean against counters to stay upright. The bathroom, where I'd sit on the edge of the tub, waiting for dizziness to pass. The bedroom, where I'd spend entire afternoons in dim light. He mapped his entire world around my shrinking one. The silence in my apartment used to feel suffocating, but with Milo's, silence became something different, comforting, safe, his steady breathing beside me, the soft sound of his tail thumping against the floor when I looked at him, the quiet patting of his paws following me through the rooms. The more I fell apart, the more Milo stitched me back together, not with grand gestures, but with presence. Healing didn't arrive like a sunrise, sudden and bright. It came in whispers, in textures, in the smallest moments I almost missed. It started with mornings. Milo developed a ritual of waking me gently, not with barking, but with his cold nose pressed against my hand where it hung off the bed. He'd wait until I opened my eyes, then rest his chin on the mattress, tail wagging slowly, as if to say, "Another day, we can do this." On the mornings when I awoke to pain already burning through my joints, I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, trying to find the will to move. Milo would hop onto the bed, something he rarely did, and curl against my side. His warmth seeped into my aching muscles, and I'd run my fingers through his fur, feeling the softness, the realness of him. I wasn't alone. That single fact made the pain feel less like drowning. I started noticing small things again. The way morning light slipped through the blinds in golden strips across the floor. The sound of birds outside my window that I'd stopped hearing months ago. The weight of a coffee mug in my hands, warm and grounding, while Milo waited at my feet with patient, watchful eyes. He became my anchor during panic. When the fog rolled into my brain and I'd forget what I was doing mid-task, standing confused in my own kitchen, Milo would appear. He'd place his paw on my hand, gentle and deliberate, and something about that touch would pull me back. My breathing would slow. The room would stop tilting. I'd remember I was Emily Race, standing in her kitchen in Albuquerque, and I was okay. We started taking short walks again. Not the ambitious hikes we used to do, but slow loops around the quiet neighborhood near my apartment. The sidewalks were dusty and cracked, bordered by desert plants and adobe walls the color of sunset. Milo adjusted his pace perfectly to mine, never pulling ahead, never impatient. When I needed to stop and catch my breath, he'd sit beside me, his shoulder pressed against my leg, and we'd both watch the world move around us. Those walks taught me to notice textures again. The rough bark of a cottonwood tree under my palm, the warm air carrying the scent of pinon, the way afternoon light turned everything softer. I realized I'd been living so deep inside my pain that I'd forgotten there was a world outside it. One afternoon, Milo tripped over his own tail chasing a leaf across the porch. He tumbled sideways in the most ungraceful way, then looked up at me with those confused golden eyes, and I laughed. The sound startled me, sharp and unexpected. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed. Couldn't remember the last time something felt light instead of heavy. Milo seemed pleased with himself after that. He brought me small gifts throughout the day. A shoe, a sock, his rope toy. Never demanding I play, just offering them like tiny bridges back to joy. I started creating new rituals to replace the life I'd lost. Brewing tea in the afternoons became a ceremony. I'd sit at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around the warm mug, and Milo would rest his head on my knee, his breathing slow and even. We'd sit like that for long stretches, not doing anything, just existing together. It felt like enough. The porch steps at sunset became our place. I'd lower myself down carefully, my joints protesting, and Milo would settle against my side, leaning his full weight into me. We'd watch the sky turn pink and orange and purple over the Sandia Mountains, and I'd run my fingers through his fur, feeling his heartbeat against my ribs. Steady, constant, proof that I was still here, still capable of feeling something beyond pain. I taught myself breathing exercises that my doctor recommended, trying to manage the anxiety that came with chronic illness. Milo seemed to understand instinctively. When I'd sit cross-legged on the living room floor, eyes closed, focusing on inhaling for 4 counts and exhaling for 6, he'd match my rhythm. His chest rising and falling beside me, perfectly synced, like we were breathing for each other. During the worst flares, when pain kept me awake through long, dark hours, Milo would climb onto the bed and press against my back, his fur soft between my trembling fingers, his heartbeat steady against my spine. The weight of him somehow made the darkness feel less vast, the pain less all-consuming. I tried to clean out a room I'd abandoned for months, a small office space that had become a graveyard of unfinished projects and forgotten dreams. I stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the mess, by how far I'd fallen, by the shame of letting everything go. Milo trotted in, grabbed a sock from the pile, and brought it to me like a prize. The absurdity broke something open in my chest. I sat down on the floor and cried, and Milo dropped the sock to press his face against mine. That day, I cleaned 1 shelf. Just 1. It took me 3 hours with rest breaks. But it was something. It was a start. I began reclaiming my life in tiny increments. Washing 1 dish instead of letting them pile up. Opening 1 piece of mail. Making 1 phone call I'd been avoiding. Milo celebrated each small victory by wagging his tail and bringing me his rope toy. And somehow his enthusiasm made me believe these small things mattered. I wasn't healing alone. Milo was healing with me. He always had been. Everything changed for me on a quiet morning, the day I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was living again. The morning comes quietly. Soft golden light filters through the kitchen window in Albuquerque, catching dust particles that float like tiny stars. I'm sitting on the floor beside Milo's bed, my back against the cabinets, running my hand along the warm fur of his side. He's awake but relaxed, his breathing deep and even. He lifts his head and rests it on my thigh, his amber eyes looking up at me with that same steady, knowing gaze he's had since the beginning. His tail thumps once against the floor. I cup his face in both hands, feeling the softness of his ears, the warmth of his breath. This moment is small, unremarkable to anyone watching, but it's everything. Chronic illness didn't cure itself. I still wake up on mornings when my body refuses to cooperate, when pain radiates through joints that shouldn't hurt, when fatigue pins me down before I've even started the day. I still cancel plans sometimes, still struggle with guilt, still have moments when the loneliness feels crushing, but I'm not alone inside it anymore. Milo gave me more than companionship. He gave me rhythm when my days lost all structure. He gave me grounding when my mind drifted into fog and panic. He gave me reasons to get up, to move, to try, even when trying felt impossible. He reminded me that living isn't always about grand achievements or perfect health. Sometimes living is just breathing together on the porch steps at sunset. Sometimes it's the weight of a warm body pressed against yours in the dark. Sometimes it's knowing that someone sees you at your worst and chooses to stay. He taught me that healing doesn't mean returning to who I was before. It means learning to live as who I am now, with limitations, with pain, with uncertainty, but also with small joys I'd never noticed before, with quiet mornings, with soft fur under my fingers, with the knowledge that I'm not facing any of this alone. I look around my apartment now and see different things than I used to. Not the prison of my isolation, but a space we've made ours. His toys scattered across the living room floor, his water bowl by the back door, his bed beside mine. Evidence of a life shared. The sun climbs higher, warming the kitchen tiles beneath us. Milo sighs contentedly, his eyes drifting closed while my hand rests on his side, feeling each breath. I'm not cured, but I'm no longer disappearing. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice helps this community grow. And if a dog has ever changed your life, feel free to share your story with us. _ I thought I was saving him, but he saved me.